Hello, everybody. Welcome to Whitmer High School's Senior College Planning and Career Night. It's also our FAFSA night. I'm Seth Everett. I'm one of the counselors here at Whitmer High School. And I'm actually being joined by Todd Matthews, who is one of our financial aid reps for the University of Toledo, and he's going to be speaking also. If your kids have already talked to you, we have done some presentations through their advisory classes and gone over some senior college planning stuff that they actually have to start going through. We are also going to have our senior meeting. Some of us have already started, so we'll be calling all the seniors down to go over graduation requirements, testing stuff, and then also where they should be at in the process of applying for college. I am joined here also with my counseling center staff, and they will be working in the background, helping answer some questions and things like that. The first thing I want to show you is if you are joining us on YouTube, you can actually see right here, down below under Sarah Hoffman and presentation, you would click on show more. If you have any questions during the presentation, type them into this document. You click on that, pull up the document, and then you can type your questions directly right into that document, and we will try and answer them as the night goes on. All right, so I'm going to go over a few things that we actually went over with the kids in the auditorium during the advisory classes. This document is actually going to be on the website for you guys to access, and you can access all the links throughout the document. The first page is the Whitmer Counseling Center staff. It actually has a link right here that takes you directly to the Whitmer Counseling Center website. And we have a lot of resources there for you to use. But down below, you will see all the counselors. April McNamara is in charge of all the students that have last names A through C. Jean Wilder has all the students with last names D through G. Laura Bose is our counselor in charge of students with last names H through L. Myself, Seth Everett, is in charge of the students with last names M through P. Eric Puffenberger is in charge of the students with last names Q through S. Chloe Fairchild is in charge of students last names T through Z. And Lauren Karras is our PVA counselor. So if you're in PVA, you would reach out to her. And Becky Swisher is our social worker. And all these are links directly to send us an email, so you can click on any of them. Our next page in this document is college application information. This gives you a link right to our counseling webpage. Also a link to order your transcripts, because that's usually part of the planning process when you are applying to schools. I showed you the webpage, but let me click on this. This actually takes you to a Google Doc that the students can fill out. Last name, first name, student number, senior class they would pick, or junior class if they're already looking, but to send their transcript to university. But senior class, they can have it emailed to themselves or sent to a third party. A third party means that the college that they might be going to, whether they're in College Credit Plus. These are some of the local schools that they might want their transcript sent to. If one of the schools is not there that they're looking at, they can actually type in that down here, another school that they might be interested in. And then right now, since they're going in the application process, they want to prepare their current transcript for the destination now. So they want to check this box. After first semester, then they would do this one. Right. Also in this document, letters of recommendation. A lot of time colleges want you to have a letter of recommendation. So plan ahead to meet your deadline. Allow a week to 10 days for the completion of your letter. We have a student brag sheet here that they can click on. A lot of times we have access to obviously their transcripts, their rank, and all that information. But a lot of the schools want to know extra stuff, any extracurricular activities or clubs that they're involved in, any volunteering. So they can click on this and it will pull up a letter of recommendation brag sheet that they can fill out and then return back to their counselor, or if they're having a teacher, write a letter of recommendation. College admission testing. If you are a senior, most of you have taken the ACT last spring. You can access the ACT and SAT right here. Most of our students take the ACT. Juniors this year will be taking the ACT in March here for free. Otherwise, there are fees involved. But if you click on this link, it takes you directly to registering for the ACT. If you have any questions, obviously contact your counselor at any time. ACT and SAT resources are right here. You can click on those and we'll take you to some great sites that help you prepare for the test. These are the dates. If you look at the dates, these are the ACT testing dates. October 23rd, you can see that the standby deadline is the 15th. So that you're almost late, and so you're not guaranteed to get in. If you're going to apply, I would start looking at December 11th, and you have to register by November 5th. If you register after November 5th, there is a late fee that is involved with that. Students filling out the Common App. The Common App is a program where you can apply to many different colleges with the same application. You just go to commonapp.com. But a lot of the information that you need to fill out that application is right here in this document. They usually ask you what our CEEB code is or our school code, which is right here, 365065. The address they want, your graduation date, and the graduating class size. Also, who your counselor is. You'll have to put your counselor's email down as a recommender. And then also how we weight 4.0 scale, weighted, and exact. So these are all information or questions that they'll ask you inside the Common App that you need. There's also national and local scholarship. Washington Local has a link to our scholarships page that is updated throughout the year. If you click on this link, it takes you directly to our scholarships page, which has a list of some of the scholarships that are up right now, but it also has links over here to scholarships through Bowling Green State University, Lourdes University, Owens Community College, and the University of Toledo. But if you keep checking back throughout the school year, all this information is here, and it will be added, and more and more will be added as the school year goes on. We'll also be sending out emails with that information. We have a lot of September college visits that have passed. Hopefully you guys have been getting those emails. There are a few October college visits left that you can log in and do through Google Meet. And then at the end here, we have a college planning checklist. All right, these are things that you should do. Registering for the ACT, meet with college admissions advisors, request your ACT scores be sent to colleges. You do that through the ACT website. Recommendation letters, we talked about that through the brag sheet. And then research apprenticeship programs. We have a great bulletin board that was put together outside the counseling center. And it's got QR codes that will take you directly to local places as far as military or trades and things like that. If you are planning on playing NCAA sports, you need to register through the NCAA Eligibility Center. If you have any questions about that, you can talk to Mrs. McNamara. She is our NCAA guru. Another thing, we have a link here to our financial aid, the FAFSA link. If you click on that, it will take you directly to the site. But we decided to bring a professional with us to talk about financial aid. We are lucky enough to have Todd Matthews from the University of Toledo here to talk about that and give us a little more information. Todd, thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
So are you able, let me switch. So Todd, are you able to share your screen?
I believe so. How's that?
Up, mine is still up. Hold on 1 second. Oh. Hold on, we're having a technical difficulty. We're trying to get him to share his screen. There we go. Perfect.
Good.
Yep, we're good. You're on there.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me out tonight. I really appreciate the opportunity to come out and speak with your seniors and talk a little bit about financial aid and the financial aid process for the high school seniors this year. So again, my name is Todd Matthews. I'm the Director of Financial Aid Operations at the University of Toledo. I've been there for about 6 years, but I've been in higher ed for 20 years. So it's a career. But let's go ahead and get started. The topics we're going to talk about tonight, obviously, what is financial aid? We're going to talk about some terms that you'll hear a lot being thrown about at different colleges, such as cost of attendance or COA, expected family contribution or EFC, financial need, and that's how it's defined in the financial aid process. Categories, types, and sources of financial aid, the FAFSA, of course, and then something that is becoming more and more common these days is special circumstances, applications, or appeals that you can do with your institution that you're interested in attending. So let's start out with what is financial aid. Financial aid is any funds that are being provided to help you pay for college. A lot of people just consider it federal grants, but it's more than that. It's federal grants, it's federal student loan program, it's the Parent Plus loan program, it's scholarships and grants that an institution may award to a student or from their high school, as you saw some of those that Mr. Everett posted, or from an outside source like a church or organization. So all those things are considered financial aid. The next thing I wanted to talk about is what is the cost of attendance when you're going to a university or college? So the cost of attendance for a student isn't just what you're going to pay in tuition and fees at a university. The whole cost of attendance is that. So your tuition and your fees, if you're living on campus, obviously room and board. Board refers to your meal plan. Most campuses, if you live on their campus, you are required to buy a meal plan through the university. Books and supplies, which you may or may not buy through the university. Transportation, how are you going to get to school and back? Are you going to be living on campus? Are you going out of state? How far away is that? So those kinds of costs are built into the cost of attendance, as well as your miscellaneous personal expenses, toothpaste, toothbrushes, clothes, things like that. That's all built into a cost of attendance. And the cost of attendance can be different at every school that you apply to or are interested in. Obviously, tuition and fees can vary fairly widely between some of the lower cost schools or community college, and then go up pretty high when you start talking about out-of-state schools or private schools. They tend to be more expensive. So all those things get built into this cost of attendance, and we'll get back to why that's important later. The next thing we want to talk about is an expected family contribution, or EFC. You may have heard about that term, EFC, already. So when you file a FAFSA, the Department of Ed spits out a number for you called an EFC, expected family contribution. And that's a measurement of a student and their family's ability to pay for college costs. And it's split into two parts. There's the part that the student is expected to contribute, and there's part that a parent or parents would be expected to contribute for a dependent student, which most of you will probably be dependent students. Don't confuse expected contribution for your out-of-pocket expenses. The EFC is really just an index that the university and the Department of Education and the state use to determine how much aid you can get. So if it says 5,000 or 10,000 or 20,000, that doesn't mean you're going to have to pay that much out of pocket necessarily. It's just a measure of how much aid you may qualify for. So how does a college determine what your financial need is? So financial need is simply your cost of attendance minus your expected family contribution, and that equals financial need. So some types of aid are based on financial need and some are not. So anything that's based on financial need, they'll look at this information, they'll look at this calculation, determine what you may be eligible for. So there's 4 basic types of financial aid. Some of them are considered gift aid, which means you don't have to pay them back. And some are considered self-help aid, which means you either have to pay them back or earn those funds. The first part of gift aid is scholarships. That's one of the biggest sources of aid that you can get to pay for college. Scholarships are often based on merit or an individual attribute of the student that is special or unique. Those again can come from the school. They can be based on athletics. They could be based on grades. They could be based on some other sort of talent. Are you good at art? Are you a musician? Things like that. So those again can come from the university. They can come from your high school. They can come from a private organization. If your parents are employed and their employer may offer some scholarships. If you're employed, your employer may offer some scholarships. It never hurts to ask. The more of these things that you can put together, the less expensive college is going to be, and the more options you're going to have when it comes time to choose which university or college you wish to attend. Grants. So most grants are awarded through the federal government or the state government. So the federal Pell Grant is the largest source of grant money available for students. That is based completely off of the information that you submit on your FAFSA. The expected family contribution, the lower that is, the more likely you are to get a Pell Grant. And the lower it is, if you do qualify for that, the more Pell Grant you will get. There's other federal grants as well, such as a SEOG grant, Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. And that's a smaller grant program. If you're a resident of Ohio and you go to an Ohio school, you may qualify for what's called an Ohio College Opportunity Grant. And that's also awarded by the state, but they do also look at your EFC to determine your eligibility. Another form of financial aid is called work study. So some of you may have heard of this. This is where you can get a job. Usually, in most cases, they're on campus, although they don't have to be necessarily, where you would work in a college office or at the rec center or some other place on campus, and you get a paycheck. So you do have to request work study, and it's a question on the FAFSA. So when it asks about that, you're going to want to say yes if you're interested in getting a paycheck through this program. The nice thing about work study is when you get a job on a campus, they know you're a college student. So they're usually really willing to work around the schedule that a college student has, which can be all over the place. We have about 10 students that work in our office, and we have several that will come in the morning and work for a couple hours, then go to class for a few hours, and then come back and work a couple more hours. Typically, you might work 15, maybe 20 hours a week at most in most work study jobs. And you'd get paid, and then you can use that money to either help with your living expenses or to pay against your tuition and fees. So it's a nice program for students. And then the last major category are student loans. So there's actually 3 major categories of loans. There's the direct student loan program, which is through the federal government, and that's loans that a student can take out in their own name to help pay for their college expenses. The good thing about those loans is while you're in school, as long as you're enrolled at least half-time, which for most colleges, that's 6 credit hours, you do not have to make any payments on those loans. When you leave school or drop below 6 credit hours or graduate, that's when you begin repaying those loans. There's another category of loans called a plus loan, and that's a parent loan that a parent can take out in their own name to help with their students' educational costs. So that is also through the Department of Education, and there's an application for that, for both those types of loans on the Department of Education's website. If you're awarded those types of loans or offered those types of loans, your school will give you directions on how they prefer that you complete it. The last category of loans are private or alternative loans, and those would be loans that a student could apply for through their bank or a national organization like Discover Student Loans or Sallie Mae Student Loans. And those are private, they're not government loans. So they do have credit checks. Most students would need a cosigner since most high school students don't have credit history. So if you're looking at that as an alternative source to help pay for college, just keep in mind you're likely to need a cosigner for those. Okay, so we already talked about the sources of financial aid as far as the federal government, and we hit a little bit on the states. Colleges and universities also provide a lot of financial aid as well. Private sources, like we mentioned before, your job, your parents' job, organizations that you or your parents belong to, those sorts of things. Churches often have some sort of scholarships for their members. Again, the common federal programs, as I already mentioned, you have the federal Pell Grant, the federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. There is a grant called a Teach Grant if you're interested in being a teacher that you can get. That is a grant for education majors who promise that they're going to teach a certain number of years in a high need school in an area of need. If you don't complete those years of service, then you have to repay the grant. So it can turn into a loan if you don't complete the terms of service. But if you do plan on teaching, it's a good grant to help with your costs, because it'd be forgiven. There's the federal work study we already talked about, and the student loans and federal plus loans. So those are your common federal student aid programs. Getting back to the state of Ohio, you have the Ohio College Opportunity Grant, or OCOG. If you go to a public school, the max per year, and this is for this current year, we don't have the exact numbers for next fall yet, although that's not likely to change much, if at all. That's $2,200 a year if you go to a public school, $3,700 a year if you go to a private school, and $1,400 a year if you go to a proprietary school. So your public schools are your University of Toledo, your Ohio State Bowling Green, schools like that. Private are like Lourdes that are often religiously affiliated. There's a lot of those in Ohio as well. And proprietary is a for-profit school. And there's some of those in the area as well. So you can see that depending on the type of school you go to, you can get a different amount if you qualify for that. And again, this is based on financial needs. So not every student will qualify for these. You won't know until you submit your FAFSA, and then the school will let you, or the state and the school will let you know what you're eligible for. Because it's an Ohio financial aid program, there are residency requirements. You have to be an Ohio citizen. And if you're a dependent student, your parent or parents need to be Ohio residents, and you would need to attend an Ohio school. Again, then you do need to file a FAFSA in order to qualify, determine your eligibility for the OCOG. There's other smaller programs that the state of Ohio has. There's a safety officers college memorial fund. The Ohio National Guard can be a big one, actually. If you want to join the National Guard, they will pay for almost everything at a state school, and a decent amount at private institutions, potentially all of it depending on the cost. Ohio War Orphan and Severely Disabled Veterans Children's Scholarship. I think that's fairly self-explanatory how you qualify for that. And then if you're planning on being a nurse, there's also a nursing education assistance loan program that you can get as well. And those are all state programs that you would work with your college to apply for. Okay, college and university aid. So that's aid that's provided by the university or college you wish to attend, that's based on both merit and need. So in the case of the University of Toledo, we award aid based on your high school GPA. Starting for next year, we're no longer taking into consideration your ACT or SAT test score. We're only going to look at your GPA. And so there's a sliding scale on what you might qualify for if you have a good GPA here at Whitmer. And you would be automatically awarded that through the application program. Other universities will have slightly different. Some universities are still looking at test scores as far as ACT and SAT. So you would want to check with the colleges that you're interested in to determine what they're going to look at. And some colleges are optional. Like this, for this school year, University of Toledo was optional. You could provide the test score or not. That was up to you.
And Todd, sorry to interrupt, but Todd, you can actually keep earning that scholarship too each year if you maintain a certain GPA, correct?
Absolutely. So most merit awards that a university is going to offer are based on the merit. So as long as you continue to show merit by earning a certain GPA or earn a certain number of credit hours per year, which can be different depending on the scholarship and institution, you can keep that. Most schools will only let you have that for the equivalent of 8 semesters, which is 4 years, so fall and spring. And then you don't have to reapply each year for those. Typically, as long as you maintain the eligibility required for that award, you would keep it. So that's a good scholarship to have because they can really start to stack up. Like there's a $6,000 award that the University of Toledo offers for merit awards that you can renew for 4 years. So, that's $24,000 that you wouldn't have to pay out of pocket or pay back in student loans. So it's not a bad deal if you can qualify for that. And then also maintain your eligibility. So good point. There's also need-based aid. So the university may look at your FAFSA information, or some universities have their own separate financial aid application. I know at one point the University of Michigan did. I'm not sure if they still do, but they'll look at your need either based on the FAFSA or their own application to determine whether or not you might qualify for that. The university or college may offer their own form of work study, which would be separate from the federal program. So those sorts of things are out there as well. But most institutions are going to use information from the FAFSA to determine whether you're going to be eligible. Also be sure when you're looking at scholarships for your individual institutions that you're looking at your deadlines. Some schools will have deadlines as early as December 1st. I know at the University of Toledo, there is a presidential award. I believe the scholarship deadline is December 1st. And that's the biggest academic merit-based scholarship that we offer. And it's only offered to a limited number of students per year. So it is competitive. And many schools have similar type programs. So you're going to want to make sure you hit those deadlines and the requirements of what you may need to submit. So the best place to find out that information is on the college's financial aid webpage, or if they have a scholarship page. So you just go to that university's website and use their little search tool and type in scholarships, and you'll most likely find that pretty quickly. Again, your private sources, foundations, businesses, churches, civic and charitable organizations. You can find lots of scholarships out there from different organizations, and you'd be surprised what you might find. I had a student about 7 years ago who got a scholarship because she had red hair. She literally had to pluck out a piece of her hair and send it in. So she did, and she got $500 for plucking out a piece of hair. That's not a lot, but I think one strand of hair is that's a pretty good deal. $500 for a strand of hair. So you never know what you might find, is my point. You can do searches online. I know on the University of Toledo's scholarship page, we have links to different search engines. Seth, do you have that sort of thing here for the outside scholarship? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we have links on the website, which I'm going to show them again at the end.
Okay, great.
How to access those links. So.
Right. So if you haven't started looking at those things, you should be doing it now. I know at University of Toledo, almost all of our scholarship applications opened on the same day as the FAFSA, which was October 1st. So if you haven't started, you're already a little bit behind, but it's not too late. You definitely want to get on those though. With these private sources, there's a lot of those types of awards that don't get awarded every year because not the right people didn't apply. So you never know what you may qualify for. Use one of the search engines, usually can type in some criteria and it will narrow it down for you. Those can be good sources of scholarship applications. So getting on to the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. Something you want to make sure that you recognize is the first word of that is free. So there's no charge to fill out a FAFSA. If you somehow get onto a site that wants to charge you money to file the FAFSA, you're in the wrong place. And there have been several different websites over the years that have been set up that will take your information and put it into a FAFSA and send it out for you, but then they're also going to ask you to pay for that. So if somehow you ended up on a site that they're asking you to pay to fill out the FAFSA, you're in the wrong place. Use the link on your school's webpage or on Whitmer's webpage so that you're sure that you're going to the right place. So what happens is this form collects demographic and financial information about the student and their family potentially. So they look at things like how much income you had. They're currently looking at 2 years prior income. So if you're filing a 22-23 FAFSA for next fall, they're going to look at your 2020 income. So that's the tax information that they're going to pull. So it's called prior year. And then every year you're going to file your FAFSA again, starting October 1st for the next school year. And they'll keep bumping that up 1 year as far as the information they're going to collect. So you're going to plug in a bunch of information about yourself and your parents if you're a dependent parent, or parents if you're a dependent student, possibly your siblings. It's available in both English and Spanish on their website. So if your parents are not native English speakers, or you are not also, you can go with Spanish. At this point, I don't think there's any other languages available. You can file it at any time during the academic year, but starting October 1st, which was obviously 12 days ago, you could start filing it for next year. And you really do want to file that as soon as you can. My daughter is a senior and she was working on it today. So you should be getting this done as quickly as possible, because there are some forms of aid that a school might award you that they only have limited amounts, and they may give it to the people that apply earliest. So the earlier you apply, the better. Also, sometimes there's some issues with filing the FAFSA. It's possible that the Department of Education may ask for some information from you that you have to supply to the school related to that. So that's called verification. I'll get into that a little bit more later, but that also can slow down the process. So it's better to know ahead of time that you needed to provide those things. Colleges may set different priority FAFSA dates. University of Toledo is February 1st. Other schools may be sooner or later. So that's why it's important to check on the financial aid pages for the different institutions you're interested in to see what the deadline is. But if you make a goal to get it done by Halloween, you should be in good shape no matter where you're planning to go. I don't know of anybody who has one any earlier than sometime in December. So again, you want to get that filed as quickly as you can now that it's open. To start out with, though, before you start doing the FAFSA, you need to get a federal student aid, or FSA ID. That's how you sign your FAFSA. And that's how your parent or parents will sign. I'm sorry, it would just be one parent. One parent would sign the FAFSA along with the student if you're a dependent student. If you're an independent student, you would just have the student. However, both the parent and the student need their own separate federal student aid ID. If you are a parent that has an older child that went to college in the previous year and you already have a federal student aid ID for them, great. That's your federal student aid ID. You don't have to get a new one. If you as a parent have attended college and used a federal student aid ID in the last 10 years or so, that's still the same one. You don't have to get a new one for this student. Your federal student aid ID as a parent goes across you and all your dependents. As a student, though, you would have your own unique one. So both parent and student should create one if you don't have it. Only the owner of the federal student aid ID should create it. So the students, you need to do this for yourself, because you're going to use this for a long time, especially if you get student loans while you're in college, which a lot of students do. You're going to need that going through. So it's not just this one time. So you need to make sure that you are creating your federal student ID and password and keeping that safe, and not losing it, because you're going to need it at least once a year for the next 4 years, and possibly beyond if you go to grad school, or like I said, if you take out loans. And you can apply for that at www.studentaid.gov, which actually is the same site that you start at for the FAFSA. So it's all in one place. So when you get onto this website, FAFSA on the web, you'll notice at the top, there's apply for aid. You would click on that, and then you'll see these steps at the bottom. That's the application process for your FAFSA. It'll tell you the documents you need, how to complete the form. Once you complete it, if you notice there's mistakes, you can how to correct them. And then once the school gets that, they'll be able to offer you aid, and then you get aid. So then the cycle starts over again, renew your financial aid. So you will go to the FAFSA on the web to start the process. So a question that we get a lot when we go to financial aid nights is, how do I determine if my student is a dependent student or an independent student? Almost all high school seniors are going to be a dependent student. There's a few things that can make you independent, many of which are difficult for a high school senior. Like if you notice, the first question here is, were you born before January 1st, 1999? I'm assuming that does not apply to any of you. So you're probably going to say no to that. Are you married? Are you working on a master's or doctorate program? And to be clear on that question, that's not asking you if eventually you plan on getting a master's or a doctorate. It means what degree are you working on next year? So in most cases, if you're going to be going off to college, this is going to be a bachelor's or an associate degree. So you would not be able to answer yes. And then are you currently serving on active duty for purposes other than training? I'm not going to go through all these because it's not just this page. It's the next page as well. So there's a lot of questions. So basically, if you answer yes to any one of these questions on these last two slides, then you're considered independent. If you answer no to all of them, then you're dependent and you need to include information from at least one parent or both parents, depending on your family situation. One thing to keep in mind that can be common, or not common, but can happen for high school seniors is one of the questions is, do you now or will you have children who will receive more than half of their support from you between July 1st and June 30th of 2023? Notice the question is not just do you now or will you have children? It's also saying, will they receive more than half of their support from you? So just having a child doesn't make you independent unless you are actually supporting that child. So keep that in mind if you do have your own child, because a college may ask you to document that if you say yes, how you're supporting the child. So be prepared if you answer yes to that question to be able to answer that. Not all colleges will ask, but some might. I've seen that happen. Another question that we get a lot are, who are my FAFSA parents? So if you're a dependent child and you, student, I mean, if you are filling that out and you want to know whose information other than your own will go on this, it's your parent. So it can be confusing. If your parents are married, then it's just both of them. You provide both of their information. If your parents are not married currently to each other or anyone else, you would just put the information for the parent that you live with or live with the most, or who provides the most support, more than 50%, I guess, for you. If everything is exactly 50-50, which is not very common, then you can choose who you want to use. But that would be the case if you have two parents and they are not married to each other or anyone else. If your parents are not married, but they live together, you still have to provide information for both parents. If your parents are divorced and you're going to be, let's say in this case, you live with your father, and your father's providing the most support, and your father is remarried, then you would provide the information for your father and your step parent. So whichever parent you're using, if they're married, you would provide that parent's spouse information as well. And the same is if a parent is widowed and then remarried, same thing. You would include the new spouse. So keep that in mind. If you get into that and you have a situation that's confusing, feel free to reach out to the college or university that you're planning to attend. If you're not sure, give us a call at the University of Toledo. We'll help you out. We'll help you figure it out, even if you're not planning to go there, because that can get confusing in some certain situations. Parents that you don't include on a FAFSA would be if you live with a grandparent and they have not legally adopted you, they just have custody or guardianship. You don't include that parent's information. You may be considered independent in that case, depending on what the actual situation is. You may need to talk to your school or your college that you're interested in to determine what your status should be in that. Another question we get is about 529 plans. So 529 plans are money that someone can put away for a student in an investment that they can use for college expenses. So where does that go on a FAFSA? So it depends on who owns the 529 plan. In most cases, it's a parent who owns the 529 plan. So it would go under their information on the FAFSA. So if it would be included in their investments. If the student owns the plan, which is uncommon, but it's possible, it should appear in the student's investments. If anyone else owns the plan, grandparent, aunt, uncle, sibling, friend of the family, if they own the plan, but it's for you, then it's not claimed on the FAFSA. However, 2 years after it pays out, that money you received would be included on your financial aid application. So this example is if your grandmother took out a 529 plan that paid tuition next fall in 2022, it will be reported on the 24-25 FAFSA as money received or paid on the student's behalf. Obviously, that's quite a bit down the road, but just so you know, you don't have to include it this year if grandma owns a plan for you. It's 2 years after you actually use the money. However, it's owned by the parent or the student, then it's reported on this year's financial aid application. And again, if you have questions about any of that, you should contact your college's financial aid office, and they'll be happy to help you. Or again, you can always contact the University of Toledo, our financial aid, which is our place is Rocket Solutions Central. You can come in and give us a question, or email us or call us, and we'll be happy to work with you on that. So another thing that's becoming more and more common is what's called special circumstances or professional judgment, depending on the school. It's the same thing. It's what do you do when the information that you're reporting on your FAFSA does not accurately represent your student and family information. Because you're using 2 years prior tax information, it's entirely possible that your family income could be wildly different than what was on your 2020 tax return. If your income is a lot more bonus, you don't have to include that this year, so they're not going to count it. But if it's a lot less, you can do this thing called special circumstances or professional judgment. The most common thing that comes into play is with the loss of income. So if a parent was laid off and had to get a new job at a lower rate or isn't able to find work, you can work with your financial aid office at your college of choice, and they can possibly, based on your circumstances, adjust your FAFSA so you might be eligible for more aid. And this is all done on a case-by-case basis at each school. So if you're thinking about applying to multiple schools and you want to get aid offers from multiple schools and you want to do a special circumstance, you're going to have to do that special circumstance with each school, unfortunately. One school's decision does not carry over to another school's. They may have different criteria, and the Department of Education has entirely left that up to the individual colleges. Again, loss of income is the most common reason why a family would do this special circumstances, but also something that we're seeing more of now with living in COVID world is unusually high medical expenses. If you have a situation in your family where someone's been paying a lot of money out of pocket, you can talk to your school about that, and they may be able to make adjustments on your FAFSA as well. If you have, once you start college next year, if you have siblings that are going to a private school, K through 12, and you're paying private tuition, the school may make an adjustment for that. And again, that's optional. Not every school will do it. I would guess in the circumstances of most of the Whitmer students, probably everybody's going to Whitmer. So this may not apply, but it's possible that it could at a lower age. If you have a death of a parent of whose information was provided on the FAFSA, you can get some adjustments made based on that. Obviously, if that parent is no longer alive, you most likely don't have access to their income, so they can make adjustments based on that. The process would be submit your FAFSA now based on the information that's requested on the FAFSA based on your circumstances. And then once that's filed, you want to wait at least a week because that's about how long it takes the school to get it, the college to get it. And then you want to contact the financial aid office and ask to speak to someone about a special circumstance or professional judgment, so you can explain what's going on in your situation in as much detail as possible. Almost all schools will have some sort of form they want you to complete and then submit documentation based on your circumstance. So you would want to get that started. And that's another reason why you want to file your FAFSA early, because if you have to go through one of these processes, it's worth it in many cases because you may qualify for more aid than you would have otherwise. But it can stretch out for a little bit because a lot of times you'll have a family provide some information And then the school will look through that and have a question about something, so it can go back and forth a little bit. It can take a month or longer potentially. So you want to make sure that you get those done as soon as possible, so you'll know what your end result is. And again, unfortunately, you have to do this at every school that you're interested in, that you want to get an award letter from, if you want them all to be based on the same information. So it's better to narrow it down to at least a few choices before you do this process, rather than try and do it with 10 schools if you've applied to 10 different colleges. Also, depending on the circumstance under which you're submitting, you may have to resubmit each year while you're in college. So it doesn't carry over from one year to the next in most circumstances. And again, that can be confusing. Don't panic. Reach out to the financial aid office at the college that you're interested in, and they will help you through this process. They want you to get as much aid as possible. So we're going to work with you to make that happen. One last thing before we get to questions is it's a process called verification, which I mentioned earlier. Verification is when the Department of Education has asked an institution to verify certain information on the FAFSA. The school will reach out to the student and say, we need certain information from you. It could be tax information, it could be asset information, it could be household size information. The important thing you need to do is to get that, figure out what it is they need and get it back to them as quickly as possible so that you can get that situation resolved. It can make a difference on your financial aid. So you don't want to have a surprise at the last minute because you turned in documents really late, like next August, and find out that you're not getting as much aid as you thought. So you want to, if you get selected for verification, you want to make sure that you get that resolved as quickly as possible. And again, if you're not sure what you need to do, contact the school that you're planning to attend, and they will help walk you through it. It can be intimidating. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It just means maybe something doesn't add up. You made a mistake. Nobody thinks that you did anything criminal. It's just strictly to make sure that the information is as accurate as possible. So I guess at this point, if you do have questions, even if you're not planning to attend the University of Toledo, you can see our phone number for Rocket Solutions Central on our email. We're located in 1200 Rocket Hall, which is off of Secor, down by the Barnes and Nobles. The build at Rocket Hall is the building behind Barnes and Noble on Secor, almost to the corner of Door. Feel free to stop in. We're open Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 5. Or you can give us a call or email us. Even if you're not planning on attending University of Toledo, but you're having questions about the FAFSA or the financial aid process, we'll help you out. So just give us a call or shoot us an email or stop in. We'll be glad to see you.
All right, thank you, Todd. We actually do have a couple questions. I'll answer the first one. The first question says, will we be able to review this video again? Yes, the video will be posted on the website. As well as the slideshows that you saw that we used tonight, those will be on there too. So yes, you will be able to review this video again. The next two questions I'm going to let you field. The first one is, once COA is reached, does UT reduce Pell Grant and other needs-based aid?
UT does not reduce Pell Grant because if you're eligible for it, you're entitled to it. However, depending on what other types of aid you have, we are required, it's not just UT, but any institution is required to make sure that you're not over awarded, which means you're given more aid than you're eligible for. We typically, in almost like every school, would basically reduce loans before they reduce gift aid as much as possible. So we rarely see this, but it's possible if a student has a ton of scholarships that they may have more aid than their cost of attendance. So if you see that happening either at UT or at another institution where they've adjusted some of the gift aid, so the scholarships or grants, call them and see if there's anything that you can do. There's ways that you can get your cost of attendance adjusted if you have a legitimate situation of why your living expenses might be higher. So reach out to that institution and they may be able to make some adjustments.
Thank you. And then one more question. How does taking a gap year affect financial aid and scholarships?
So as far as your federal and state aid, it doesn't really affect anything. You would just apply for financial aid when you're ready to go. So it would be based on that year's financial aid. So if you're not going to start to the fall of 23, then you would file a 23-24 FAFSA. And then it would be based on your 2021 income and assets. So if that changes radically from 20 to 21, then that would have an impact. As far as scholarships, every school is going to probably handle that a little bit differently. Some schools may not honor a merit award if you take a gap year, but they may, especially depending on the circumstances. So I always recommend that you reach out to the individual schools to see what they will do. And it does depend somewhat on the type of scholarship as well. So a gap year could impact you in scholarships, not likely really in grants.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you, Todd. I am actually going to share one more thing. So there's a lot of information, but I wanted to show everybody that the Washington local website has a lot of this information, and that's where you'll be able to find it. If you go into the Washington local website, it's you can click on schools and click Whitmer High School. And once you click on that school, scroll down here, and on the left-hand side is Counseling Center. This is actually the link to the video that you're watching right now. And you'll be able to access that YouTube video from that link right here. But you can click on Counseling Center, and down here are a bunch of testing links, Academy, ACT Academy and things like that to help with testing. And then there's also down here financial aid. It's got the FAFSA website and then a bunch of other different scholarship information right here that you can apply for. There's also a college planning link over here on the left-hand side that has all our visits, some different guides for you to plan depending on what year you are, military stuff down here on the right-hand side, and links to a lot of the different universities. And then here's an actual planning guide that has a lot of the links for applying to college and information like that with checklists. So that's about all we have for tonight. One thing I do want to mention to our seniors out there, when you're applying, whether it's for college or it's a job, these places do check social media. So please make sure your social media is appropriate and make sure you're using your senior year appropriately and not getting into any sort of trouble this year, because that can also hurt you when it comes to applying to these places. But Todd, thank you very much for having us and or for joining us tonight. And we really appreciate, we've done this a few years now, and it's very helpful.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
All right, so we're going to end our presentation there. If you have any questions, please contact your counselor at any time. And again, all these slideshows and the video will be on the website. All right, thank you. Have a good night.